Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Break, another great edition. We've got a member of our 40 under 40 group for 2020. We're very excited about that. Vikki Chowney, who's Global Head of Content and Publishing at Hill+Knowlton Strategies. Vikki, welcome to the show and congratulations on your award.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was an amazing start to my week for sure.
It was. It's always, you know what, that's probably the article that gets more traffic than any other piece we do in the whole year. Shared, and people really get into it. It's fun. So the next generation of leaders and talent for the industry. So we thought we'd catch up and chat to you. Now, as observant viewers will notice, you've got a similar accent to mine. So you came over to the US from the UK about a year and a half ago, or maybe 15 months ago. Is that right? Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so I was with Hill+Knowlton in London for about 3.5 years, working with Richard Miller and Simon Shaw on rolling out our 3P comms model and really kind of embedding our new process and the way in which we used purpose as a driver for the way that we responded to briefs across the London market.
So what was 3P? What does that stand for?
So that stands for purpose plus performance equals preference.
There you go.
And so that basically means that, if you think about talking about the key elements of a brand, so like your USPs, the core elements of your product, then that is, that's really the place that you start. When you then layer on a level of purpose and you think about the legacy that a brand can leave in the world, that's really where you drive that customer preference. And that's about, really thinking about, why a company would be talking and what they're going to do that's outside of just their products. And that's when you really see both a commercial and kind of a comms impact. So that was what I was doing there. And, when you look...
You had a little spell at Condé Nast, didn't you, on the owner side?
Yeah, so I spent 3.5 years in the London team, and then I went over to Condé Nast, kind of taking a lot of the learnings of having worked with content for my entire career, and helping them move towards more of a centralized agency model that worked across different titles. So that was an incredible experience, but I think in my heart of hearts, I really missed H&K, and I'm an agency girl, and I wanted to come back. So therefore, when Richard was made joint global president, the US market was a huge potential area of growth for us. So I came over to take what we'd done in London and kind of tweak it and apply it to a different market, but very much start to create that consistency across our global network.
So Richard, is he now over here? Because I know he was planning to move over, but obviously COVID happened. Is he sort of, or is he still sort of back and forth?
Yeah, so he's still working remotely because obviously he went back and had to look after his family during lockdown. So he's working crazy hours. Still is working to the US time zone and is super present with us. We missed him. We wish he was here, but he's not been able to make that move yet.
Yeah, well, we'll all see when that's going to happen again. Tell us what a content and publishing leader does in a PR context. Tell us a little bit about that. We've all heard about how content and branded content is a real growth area, and it's sort of the owned part, I guess, of the PESO, paid, earned, shared, and owned. But tell us, what's a typical day for you?
So I think probably like every PR professional, no day is the same. But my role is to think about who we create content with. So whether we're looking at influencers or industry thought leaders or from within a client, what that content is. So what's the format based on best practice? What are our audiences leaning into and engaging with? And then also, where does it live? So what's our channel strategy and where are we going to publish it? And that's the really interesting part, I think, in a comms agency, because typically, once upon a time, a PR agency might be heavily weighted in earned, whereas now I think we're much more present across all of the PESO mix. So we're doing far more paid, we're doing far more shared, I think that becomes really interesting in terms of how we think about content, because it's not just one type of content anymore. The breadth of what the format is so much more than that. So that's what a content publishing person does. And I'm very lucky to have a kind of network of leaders across our 8 kind of innovation and creative hubs, where we put these senior leaders who work together across all of our innovation and creative agenda, of which content publishing is one. And they really are the catalyst for driving growth in that area, based out of those hubs. And it's been a strategy that's worked really well for us. We have one in New York, Toronto, Sao Paulo, building up one in Berlin, and then we've got Singapore, Shanghai, and also Dubai. So that team working together makes my job really exciting, because we're getting so much diversity of thought with them.
Yeah, we saw Weber Shandwick doing an advertising campaign, Got Milk, reviving an iconic advertising campaign built around social. What's the sort of work you've done that you're most proud of that really sums up what you were just describing in terms of that content?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two clients that I immediately think of, and they're at two very different ends of the spectrum. One is the work that we've been doing for A&A here in the US, and like that piece that you just referenced, that actually started from a really, really good relationship that we've had with them for a long time around earned media strategy, developing into content. So we shot an ad for them to talk about one of their new business class seats, and kind of like create an ad to kind of to bring that to life and do some great storytelling. And I think that was a real moment for us in the US, where we saw our studio capabilities really start to blossom and become more mature. And I think what you see when you have a client like that, where you have real trust, is you add newer work streams to that, because it's rooted in really good kind of creative guardianship and really great media strategy. So you have these two balances of amazing creativity and trust in that, but also people who understand the reputational elements of that client. So how that account is growing is amazing. And then I also think on the flip side of more like heavy content work that we do for people like the UN. So we did a piece of work for them when I first moved over last year, around World Humanitarian Day. And our brief was to tell the stories of female humanitarians on that particular day, which is a recurring annual moment where they aim to celebrate and commemorate the lives of humanitarians who have lost their lives in previous years. So what we did was, instead of just create like one moment, we went back to them with an integrated plan around content and media strategy. So we created a site that would tell 24 stories of 24 different female humanitarians in a very different way. And we did some in partnership with media. So we did exclusive with people like Aussie.com. Some we did illustration, some with video, so on and so forth. Some were long form features. And what we were able to do is create this kind of evergreen content that still, if you go to the site now, you can kind of understand and empathize with these women in a really unusual way. So I think those are two ends of the spectrum, which I'm super proud of, and I'm grateful that we're able to do that kind of work with them.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes, definitely. How have you found in lockdown doing production, doing video work, TV style work? Yeah. Obviously, that's been challenging. How have you managed to be creative? We've seen some interesting activation with iPhones and in people's kitchens and all this sort of stuff. How's that been for you and the team?
I think that, in a way, the reduction of being able to do normal kind of creative work has forced people to think more out of the box and be more creative in the way in which we go about building stuff. So we've done a lot of things where we're either remotely directing or we're remotely kind of joining something to kind of help kind of almost community manage the conversation. For Adidas, we were doing things like briefing their talent to do kind of Zoom-based conversations that we were then editing into social content. For P&G, we had our content and publishing team joining as an Instagram-based live conversation with Queen Latifah around the work that she's doing with P&G. And then we're also doing things like remote filming shoots in Japan. So we had, again, for A&O, we were working with them and remote kind of directing a shoot via Zoom, which was quite challenging on hours. But the team are incredibly dedicated and the clients are really great. So it was a tough experience, but they're all learning new ways to do these things, and I think it's incredible the work that they've been able to kind of produce off the back of that.
Yeah, are you seeing any early sort of indicators from Asia about how they might be coming out of COVID a little bit earlier than us, and are there any things we can learn from that, or is it basically we still all bets are off and nobody really knows what's going to happen?
I think the wonderful thing is that we're still doing a lot of planning for the return, and I think when I think about the types of work that we're doing the most, the first thing would be that remote, that kind of doing things remotely in a virtual world. So converting what we would have normally done into kind of a virtual sense. The second thing would be, well, what I would call welcome back planning, which is clients who are looking forward to when they are able to kind of re-enter kind of a normal world, if we're kind of posing it in that way.
Whatever that normal world's going to look like, yeah.
Ends up being. And I think that's the positive thing. I think there's realistic caution in when that work might be able to actually come to light and be published. But there's definitely that sense of hunger in wanting to invest in what's going to happen when we are able to kind of return to normality. So that I find heartening. And I think what I'm definitely seeing from clients in Asia is a sense of wanting to be mindful with tone of voice, but also thoughtful in the way in which they talk about things. It's not, well, we're just going to go back to normal and we're just going to punt the product. It's let's really think about how people are feeling and look at research and help that to inform a creative strategy. So we're doing something that feels appropriate rather than, just returning to a normal marketing sense.
When you look at some of the confusion around TikTok and WeChat and WhatsApp and Snap and all these new social platforms that are brilliant for content, and we've seen some fantastic applications in during COVID, what's your take on that? And as a planner, if you're planning creative, can you plan with any certainty about what platforms to use, or do you just have to be scrappy and quick to pivot if you need to?
I think it's the latter. I think what we're doing more of now, so I talk about long-term planning, but when it comes to like immediate activations in the next couple of months, we're having to be, again, very realistic about what people are using right now, and really look at what the platforms are launching. So I just this morning planned a brainstorm for a proactive piece of work that we're going to be doing, pitching an idea for Instagram Reels. Those kind of moments where we're able to jump on something and, keep an eye on whether people are actually using it and whether influencers are leaning into something, but then trying to take advantage of the new types of formats that we're able to play with. And I think on TikTok, it's really about just holding for a second and seeing how the political landscape is going to even out in that sense, particularly in the US right now, and not writing it off, because I think that would be a bit extreme and a bit trigger happy. But just being thoughtful about not investing huge amounts of money in things before we really know what the lay of the land is.
Yeah. And finally, just to quickly finish, what's the biggest, having worked on both sides of the Atlantic, what's the biggest differences you've seen? Obviously, you landed at a pretty interesting time in the world's history and the US, but very quickly, what's the biggest difference working over here?
I think the sense of brevity and the directness with which you can make a point, which is actually quite helpful sometimes when you've got a busy kind of schedule of things to get through and you really need to just make a decision. I think that's a positive that I've found since being over there.
And that's funny because you'd think the Brits are renowned for that, getting to the point and telling it how it is. But that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more of a sense of trying not to be too, or there's a perception that you're being rude if you're being too direct, perhaps. So that maybe requires a little bit more explanation around why you want to do something.
Yeah. Well, listen, Vikki, big congratulations on being in part of the PR Week 40 Under 40. Looking forward to that virtual celebration in October and catching up in person at some point, hopefully. maybe not next year. So great to catch up with you.
Great. Thanks so much.